Hey guys, welcome to Balance Tip Tuesdays. I'm your host, Dr. James Spencer, the Balance and Movement Doc, here with the inBalance team. We got Coach Don Stanley joining us as well, and then
Hey guys,
we'll have Coach Mike Katz joining as well in a few minutes. So today we're going to be talking about the benefits of toes strength, as well as last week was a little bit about the big toe. This week is going to be more about the toe strength aspect. Some exercises that will benefit you as far as overall balance as well as foot strength. What we find with a lot of our athletes and a lot of our clients that we work with is the lack of toe strength increases your chances of falling. And as we know, we spend $50 billion a year on non-fatal falls per the CDC statistics. So those are things that, we want to create awareness towards and provide a little bit of education as well as some take-home exercises for you guys to explore and start to add into your routine, whether that's part of your movement prep or part of your actual workout program. And Don, why don't you give us a little bit about what you guys have been doing in your facility and what you've been doing with some of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really interesting about the toes in general. Something that we really don't think a whole lot about until you actually injure a toe, and then you start to understand how important your toes are in movement. And the majority of us spend a significant amount of time seated, and also having our feet in shoes all of the time. Just my study of biomechanics, in general, I've noticed in movement that people have a very poor awareness of weight distribution, meaning where their weight is divided across the foot. So that's just in general. And again, something that I didn't have a huge awareness about until I really met you, Dr. Spencer, is really, starting to get people to, take their shoes off. In my facility, it's a really nice turf. So as much as I can, I get people to take their shoes off and then get them to start doing things like squatting and lunging and things that they really have to be aware of, weight distribution. Generally, when people move, they just throw their weight, in whatever direction they're moving. So if they're stepping forward, lunging forward, the momentum carries their weight out beyond their base of support, and that has people off balance. So in general, just number one, getting people barefoot, because there's a lot, particularly with the turf barefoot, people have a lot more. It's not super rough, but it's enough of a stimulation on the bottom of the foot that people really start to become aware. And particularly when you start squatting and lunging, the toes are a big part of almost, I don't want to say the braking system, so that you're not throwing your weight outside of your base of support. So just for starters, that's a big one, is get barefoot, walking, marching, skipping. And then I'm a big one starting with lunging, because when you step into a lunge, the tendency is to want to throw all your weight forward, and then you're outside your base of support. And that's where people really start to figure out how their toes interacting with the ground can really help with their balance and weight distribution.
Well, I'd like to add a point to that. When you say that we're kind of getting out of the base of support, I'd like to paint a picture for everybody listening at home. Think of yourself like all of us are walking through the jungle barefoot, and we're tiptoeing through and we're hunting prey. And when we're hunting prey, we have to be very, very silent, right? Well, if you are falling forward and you are outside of that base of support, you may land and crunch the leaves and now your prey is gone, right? Or you may have a lion behind you that we have to then boom, sprint from. Well, when you have better base of support and better toe strength, you become more aware of the feet. You're able to stop mid stance as you're walking and hold that leg up versus falling forward. And, for many, that could be the choice of life or death, whether we're hunting and or stepping off a curb,
That's
right?
a Yeah, that's an excellent point. When I say outside your base of support, that's a little bit of coaching technical jargon. But if you can imagine, if your weight is outside of your base of support, that means that you're falling. And if
Exactly.
if you're falling, then you're going to have to catch yourself. And what does that mean? You're going to have to stick a foot out. If you can catch yourself quick enough, and if you can't catch yourself quick enough, then you're gonna fall. You're gonna land. Really, you could land on a knee, land on a hip, and where a lot of people, a lot of injuries happen when people reach out to try to stop themselves from falling, and that's generally where you'll break a wrist or an elbow, or if you fall hard on a hip, and so that's an excellent point. Is outside the base of support means essentially that you're falling. I also say this is that when your weight is outside your base of support, you can't develop any power for movement. Particularly, that's another thing. You reach a certain age is not just falling, but having enough balance to where you can move quickly to get out of the way. If you're, walking down the street and you step off a sidewalk or something and there's something coming at you, having the balance to be able to react quickly and move out of the way. Yeah.
Yeah, very good point. And to add a little bit to that, we're not all research guys here, but I would like to throw out a study talking about toe strength. It was done by Mikkel et al., and he polled 300 older clients. And what he noticed was they had an increase, a 20% increase in toe strength compared to the other group of people who fell more frequently. So, pretty significant there from just not overall base of support, whether it's performance, but also just life longevity and fall prevention. So, I think that's a very important statistic, and that's also what's driving a lot of the programming here at the inBalance system.
Absolutely. I would like to point out, like in particularly in athletics, when you're dealing with athletes, the mantra is bigger, faster, stronger. Okay. And you start to talk about ground reaction forces. And what does that mean? If I've got a big engine, if I've got super strong legs, and I can put a lot of power into the ground, okay, then that's gonna, the opposite equal reaction of putting a lot of power into the ground is a lot of explosion in the other direction. But the interface of your foot to the ground is the weak link. And I can tell you from my own standpoint, I would say that in the world of athletics, there's a very poor understanding. I mean, everybody's talking about ground force reaction. Everybody's talking about building, more power, whether it's, drive, leg drive into the ground, or, increasing your stride length, all of these things that we're trying to do to generate more power into the ground. But the interface of the foot into the ground, that's the weak link. So if you
Exactly.
have poor mechanics of the foot into the ground, then that power is just going to be dissipated. You're not going to be able to transfer that power from the engine into the ground and back. And over the last couple of years, you just really start to hear people talking about, the ankle and the role that the ankle plays, and having functional, particularly dorsiflexion, or being able to flex your ankle, and almost little to no language about the midfoot and the toes. So without that proper relationship of mechanics between the toes and the ankle, again, that interface is where it breaks down. So you can have the biggest engine in the world, but if that interface where the power is converted, if that's a weak link there, then it's not going to make any difference at all.
Yeah, and very good point there. So today, to add to that, Don, I was talking to my good friend Aaron Rhodes, who is the Major League Strength coach for the Minnesota Twins. And one of the things that we were discussing is foot positioning, right?
Oh, that is such a
And
big one for me. Yeah.
and awareness of the foot position. And I know that's something the first time I worked with you, after you treated me, I got up off the table and you said, okay, close your eyes, march in place, and find your awareness of the foot. And is that equal left to right?
Yes.
Right. And I know
Yes.
that was a good experience for me to have that aha moment of, no, it's not. And then, no, it's not. Now, what do we do about it?
This is such a big one for me in almost any sport or activity. Okay. There's shapes. So when you think of like a major league pitcher at the delivery, the release of the pitch, his body is in a very specific shape. Okay. So
Mhm.
part of being a light athlete is, can you express those positions? Now, when you talk specifically about the foot in almost any sport, okay, and I see this all the time, particularly in sports that there's any type of, agility component where people don't really have a great understanding of the position that they're supposed to put their foot in, for starters. And then the next thing is as you said, is they just don't have a good sense. They don't, trainers, this is trainer speak, we call it proprioception, but it's like they don't have a good awareness of where their foot is. So unless they're looking at their foot, they don't really, they don't have and that's a big one that we've seen, with the balance team, is that the more that we're working on these drills with particularly the toes, uh, the better a person has an awareness of their foot, the placement of their foot, and where their foot is in space without having to look at their foot. So those things are huge.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly. And that's something that we're doing with the evaluation and with a lot of the clients that we see is we're assessing their big toe as well as their 4-digit strength to see, okay, what is their objective baseline? Now we do a 6-week or a 12-week program, and does that foot strength improve or does that toe strength improve? And we're seeing drastic improvements from overall foot, but as well as grip strength uh, correlated to the balance programs.
Absolutely. I would say this: if you step outside the world of athletics, you just talk about general population. And, I'm a therapist, I'm not a clinician, so I don't know the exact percentages, doc. So you can, keep me from getting in trouble here. But, my understanding clinically is there is having an anatomically short leg is a ridiculously small percentage. It almost never exists. So when somebody has one leg shorter than the other, it's an imbalance. And this is another one that we hear all of the time. I've got flat feet.
Yeah.
Flat feet are actually, in general, quite rare. Okay. In most cases, there's a compensation where the person is turning their foot out to get around the fact that they've got stiffness or a lack of mobility in the foot. So what's really interesting is this: take a person that swears that they have flat feet, get them to do a couple of exercises, put their foot into a proper position, and now all of a sudden they have an arch. But here's where it gets really interesting, right? You get a person to put their foot in a right position, and now not only do they have an arch, but now you ask them to start moving, and a lot of really, really interesting things start to happen. Very interesting things. Your entire, movement profile changes when you put the foot in a proper position and you start to engage the toes. Yeah.
And I think that's a good segue for next week's live as well as talking a little bit about the midfoot and the arch and how that's the most stable structure, right? But
Absolutely.
I think the key to all of that of what we're describing is the fact that awareness is curative, and we put these people in the right proper position for them to make that aha moment of this feels different, this looks different, and now we can anchor that into the nervous system, and that's how we create new patterns or new pathways to now not only educate the brain, but also educate movement and movement patterns.
Absolutely. I think we can appreciate and say, if people actually, because there's so much information in the world of fitness in particular, people really get overwhelmed with the amount of information. Like, what am I supposed to focus on? Breathing's important. This is important. That's important. And what we know, particularly because we've spent so much of our career working with injuries and, dealing with sports medicine issues. If people really fully appreciated how important the toes were, there would be a lot more focus on that. Yeah,
Well, and again, I don't want people to take the movement algorithm for granted. Just being able to stand up on 2 feet every day is a blessing. Because
absolutely.
I've seen many people that have had vestibular issues that are really holding on to the wall, hoping that they're not going to fall over. So, again, movement is medicine. Go out there and appreciate that. And I know with everything that we're doing with the Balance program and the Balance team, I know that this is just the beginning of us helping many people out there.
Absolutely.
So, with that being said, I think the Media Zone crew is going to chime in for the clip of the day, and we may have a few for you today. So that was the lateral balance beam walk. And as you can see, a lot of the majority of the position is kind of in that athletic stance. I know as a young kid, I was always taught don't get caught on your heels. And clearly, you can't do that here, right? So, this is one of my go to exercises for many of the equestrians that I see as they have to keep that ball of the foot nice and stable and the toes nice and strong as they put their foot in the stirrups, as well as with you, Don, many of the sprint mechanics that you're talking about.
Absolutely. I was just keying in watching that video and seeing how much the toes were working as you're sidestepping on the balls of your feet. Yeah,
And as we know, movement's triplanar, right? So we got forward, backward, side to side, as well as rotational.
hmm,
And a lot of times we're always walking forward. Very rarely do we walk backwards, and very rarely do we walk side to side. So for what we're doing, that's a lot of my dynamic warm ups and or part of my exercise programming for a lot of my clients.
absolutely.
I like to call those the happy feet, right? We're getting some toe spacers in there to really create a wider base of support, like we talked about. As we increase our base of support, that allows us a better balance, as well as our toes, a lot of times, are stuck in this very narrow position in the shoes that we wear. And having those toe spreaders in allows just those muscles in between the bones to really stretch out and splay out that foot for better ground reaction or better contact. And exploring your toes and exploring your movement, whether it's the foot and the ankle or the toes themselves, again, the goal is just to increase awareness to the foot, as many people don't pay much attention to it.
Absolutely.
So there's some banded exercises that we also include. A lot of times we're creating resistance to the big toe to help it stay in the plane of motion as we lift, as well as delineating from big toe to the other four digits. As we do this, it increases the strength as well as also movement awareness or proprioception, as we alluded to earlier. So those are kind of the three go-to exercises that we're using with the balance program. I know we have many others, Don. Some of those that we talked about earlier that you're using in your facility. Why don't you go ahead and share that with the listeners at home?
Yeah, so a couple of my favorite exercises again, I train jujitsu, so if you think of that, standard martial arts position where you're kind of kneeling and you're sitting back on your heels. I like to tuck my toes underneath me and kind of, push off, give myself a little bit of resistance. Also like to use, I guess we call it like the catcher's position. If you imagine a catcher is kind of squatting and they're up on the toes and the balls of their feet. So we kind of start in that position and then just rock your feet back into like a standard squat position. I also like to take pieces of TheraBand and kind of wrap it around the foot in an X. So there's a little bit of resistance there so that I can work on expanding the toes laterally like this. And also you can, lift up on the big toe and then the other toes independently. Yeah.
And again, for everybody watching and listening at home, you see how valuable and how much importance we place on the foot and the toes themselves, not just off of the research that we alluded to earlier, but also how important that is that we're starting to do some research on the correlation of foot strength as well as morbidity and mortality rates as well. So, anybody at home, we would love some feedback from you guys. Any questions or comments you have, please chime in. And let's see, we may have one here already. Question coming in here. How can we evaluate our toe strength? So going back to, great question. One of the things that we talked about, and I have it right over here, quick TV timeout. This is called a toe dynamometer. So here is on one side, we hold, we place the big toe down on here, and we resist as we sit. So the big toe would create pressure down into the ground as I pull away to get a peak strength for the big toe. And then as you can see here, we're also able to place the other 4 digits on while the big toe is off. So that way we can check, same thing, 4 toes splay down into the ground, and I pull away to get a peak pressure or peak pounds on the unit of measurement. And this is the number one way that many people aren't using this, but that's something that we're placing a lot of value on as far as our objective measurements for the balance program and programming itself. And a way to make sure that what we're doing as far as the programming at home is also correlating to improvements, whether it's performance and or strength. So very good question there from the Media Zone crew.
Excellent.
Don, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Again, I just think that, awareness is curative. It's like a lot of the balance stuff that we do. It doesn't have to be lengthy or complicated. There's a lot of different ways that you can add in. I mean, shoot, off the top of my head, just, sitting, you're standing in front of, the mirror, brushing your teeth. You can do toe raises, and you can do like Dr. Spencer did with the happy feet. So there's a lot of opportunities throughout the day to, really work on your toe strength. A big one for me, without getting too complicated, we absolutely understand the correlation between, the foot, ankle, particularly the toes, and low back pain. There's a massive correlation there. And so when people really start to work on their feet and ankles, increase their foot strength or toe strength, you can really see some big changes in low back pain. So they're just one more excellent, reason, we're almost referring to like, balance work and, strengthening your feet, like into, flossing your teeth. A little bit of prevention every day can show some really big dividends.
Exactly. So thank you guys at home for everything that you have chimed in on or submitted as far as questions and comments. And we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday for Balance Tip Tuesday.
Thanks a lot, guys.